There are 10 foods written plainly into the pages of Scripture that can begin mending the body almost the moment you eat them, and the modern world has all but forgotten every one. Think of what the wellness trade sells you now. The powders in tall jars, the $14 juice cleanses, the supplements with names you cannot pronounce. Nearly all of it was written down thousands of years ago, in simpler words, describing simpler things that grew in the ground and hung from the branch. I have come to believe, after a long life of tending the sick and the growing, that the foods in Scripture were never only religious symbols, they were medicine. They were the pharmacy of a people who had no other, and when researchers today put these same foods through careful clinical trials, they keep arriving at the same humbling conclusion. The ancients knew exactly what they were doing. So walk with me through 10 foods that appear directly in the biblical text, and let me show you, with real and current science, why each one is a healing power the modern age misplaced. Stay through the whole list, because number 4 was so prized that the Egyptian labourers who raised the pyramids were partly paid in it, and number 9 was given as a luxury gift by a patriarch to an Egyptian ruler. Not grain, not gold. This one specific food, and once you learn what it does for the heart and the blood vessels, you will understand why a desperate man reached for it. My name is Brother Benedict, and for 40 years I have studied the foods our forebears grew and the healing they found in them. So if that is the sort of thing you want more of, consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Now let us begin our descent through the 10, starting at the very bottom of the list, and working our way down to the one food I would tell any person to keep in their kitchen above all others. Number 10. The date, which I think of as the original marching ration, the food that kept whole armies on their feet. The date palm is named more often than almost any other fruit-bearing tree in Scripture, and not because it was pretty to look at. It was named because it kept people alive in some of the harshest country on earth. Soldiers crossing open desert carried dates. Traders covering hundreds of miles carried dates. Pilgrims walking the long road up to Jerusalem carried them too, because a date is dense with calories, keeps for months without spoiling, and is packed with fast, natural sugars that refuel the body without the hard crash that comes from refined sugar. Beyond simple fuel, a single date you can hold in the palm of your hand carries magnesium, potassium, copper, manganese, and a good share of the B vitamins, and its fiber slows the release of that sugar so the rise in the blood stays gentle. The proper name of the tree is Phoenix dactylifera, and I find that name fitting, for the fruit rises to meet the body's need again and again. Now here is the part that always moves me. Controlled trials have found that women who ate dates in the last weeks of pregnancy went on to have shorter labours and arrived at the hospital with the cervix already more ready than those who did not. The midwives of the old world prescribed dates for exactly that reason, and they were right, long before any of us could explain the mechanism. The polyphenols and tannins in the fruit carry antimicrobial properties as well, and the ground pits were used in traditional Arabic medicine against infections of the gut. The old counsel was 3 to 5 dates before a day of work or a long journey. And to this day, dates are the food used to break the Ramadan fast, because after a long stretch without eating, the body takes them up smoothly and steadily rather than in a violent surge. In the household they served as the sweetener before there was any sugar to speak of, stirred into breads and pressed into a thick syrup that kept through winter. This is a survival food with a clinical record behind it, and I have watched a few of them restore a faint and trembling person more surely than any tonic in my cupboard. Number 9, the pistachio, the nut that a patriarch judged worthy of a king. In Genesis chapter 43 verse 11, when Jacob sends his sons down into Egypt during a famine to bargain with the official who controls the region's grain, he tells them to carry gifts, and pistachios are named on that list. Sit with that a moment. A man negotiating for the very survival of his family chose pistachios as something worth laying before an Egyptian ruler. That tells you how highly they were valued. This was currency-grade nutrition. Pistachios stand apart from other nuts because they are unusually rich in lutein and zeaxanthin. the two carotenoids that gather in the macula of the eye and shield it. Regular eating of them is linked to a lower risk of age-related macular degeneration, the very thing that steals the center of sight from so many in old age. They carry more potassium per serving than most nuts, which serves the blood pressure, and they hold an unusually complete set of amino acids for a plant. But what surprises researchers most sits in the gut. Eating pistachios regularly raises the count of beneficial bacteria, the bifidobacteria in particular, more than most other nuts that have been tested. The structure of their cell walls means some of the fat is never fully absorbed and instead feeds those bacteria, which gives more lasting fullness and fewer net calories than the label would have you believe. They also carry a green pigment and a wealth of antioxidants under that thin skin, and a handful of them makes a snack that steadies the appetite instead of stirring it up. In the old kitchens they were eaten raw or lightly roasted, ground into paste and pressed for an oil that was rubbed onto the skin. A nut a hungry patriarch thought fit for a king is a nut worth a place on your own table. Number 8. Barley, the grain of ordinary working people that outdoes the grains we prize far above it. In the ancient world it was the grain of soldiers, sailors and labourers, the folk who could not afford wheat, and when the Lord fed the 5,000 in the 6th chapter of John's Gospel, those loaves in the boy's basket were barley loaves. Barley holds the highest concentration of the fibre called beta-glucan of any grain there is, and the matter is settled enough that health authorities have approved a formal claim for it. Beta-glucan forms a thick gel in the digestive tract that slows the uptake of glucose and flattens the spikes in blood sugar, binds cholesterol and carries it out of the body, feeds the good bacteria of the gut, and even stirs the immune cells to greater activity. Clinical comparisons have shown barley beating oats for steadier blood sugar after a meal, and it sits lower on the glycemic scale than wheat or white rice, so it gives energy that lasts rather than energy that flares and dies. There is a humility in this that I love. The rich ate their fine white wheat, and the poor ate their coarse barley, and it was the barley all along that did the greater good for the body. In the old way it was cooked whole as a porridge, ground into a flat coarse bread, or dropped into the stew pot to thicken it, and the hulled grain keeps far more of its fibre than the polished pearl barley sold today. Cook a pot of it and keep it by, and you have the base of many days' eating, steady and cheap and kind to the blood. Number 7. The pomegranate, the antioxidant that adorned the Temple of Solomon. The pillars of that temple were carved with 200 pomegranates, a sign of abundance and life, and I do not think the choice was accident. Pomegranates contain compounds called punicalagins, which are found in almost no other food on the table. The gut breaks these down into substances called urolithins, and it is there, on the urolithins, that much of the research is now fixed. They show anti-inflammatory action, they protect the mitochondria that power our cells, and in laboratory studies they press against certain lines of cancer cells. Clinical trials using pomegranate juice have reported lower blood pressure, less oxidation of LDL cholesterol, more flexible and supple arteries, and reduced C-reactive protein, which is one of the truest signals of inflammation running in the blood. The concentration of polyphenols in this one fruit outranks red wine, green tea, and even the celebrated blueberry, which is remarkable when you think how loudly those others are praised, and how rarely the pomegranate is named at all. The seeds and the juice give you the greater part of the value, but the rind, which nearly everyone throws away, is more concentrated still. The old healers brewed that rind into a tea for infections of the gut, and it is studied even now for the antimicrobial power of its tannins. Use the whole fruit and waste none of it. Number 6. Garlic. The food the Israelites wept over in the wilderness, wandering on manna, weary of it, the people weep, and in the book of Numbers, chapter 11, verse 5, they cry out that they miss the fish of Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. If you understand what garlic actually does inside the body, their grief begins to look entirely reasonable. When garlic is crushed or chopped, an enzyme within it goes to work and produces a compound called allicin, and allicin is one of the broadest natural antimicrobials known to us. It is active against bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites at once, and it strikes at several pathways in the invader at the same time, which makes it very hard for resistance to take hold. Trials show garlic cutting both how often people catch colds and how long those colds linger. Studies confirm that it lowers blood pressure and lowers LDL cholesterol, that it makes the blood platelets less prone to clumping, and that it protects the liver. Now here is the detail that matters most in your own kitchen. Allicin is delicate and heat destroys it, so raw crushed garlic is far more potent as medicine than garlic that has been cooked to softness, and the ancients recorded this reverence in ink. The Egyptian medical papyri, the great Ebers papyrus chief among them, list garlic in more than 20 separate preparations. More than 20. That is not superstition. That is a people keeping careful notes on something they had watched work, again and again, across generations. The simplest way to take it is the oldest. Crush a clove, let it rest a few minutes so the allicin can fully form, and then eat it, or stir it into food only at the very end of cooking so the heat does not undo it. A little honey softens the bite of it, and the two together make a remedy I have leaned on through many a winter fever. Number 5. The fig, the prescription that once saved a king's life. In the second book of Kings, chapter 20, verse 7, King Hezekiah lies dying from a severe and infected wound, and the prophet Isaiah gives what is nothing less than a medical instruction. Take a cake of figs, he says, and lay it as a poultice upon the boil. They do, and the king recovers. Now consider what a fig actually contains. It holds a protein-digesting enzyme called phycine, which breaks down dead and damaged tissue and so cleans a wound from within, much as a modern surgeon debrides one. It also carries psoralins and benzaldehyde, both with antimicrobial properties, and the fresh latex that weeps from a cut fig has been shown to hold back the growth of bacteria and to speed the earliest stages of skin healing. Fig latex has even been studied against stubborn hospital bacteria, including the resistant strain we call M. arce. As ordinary food, the fig is richly mineral-dense, full of soluble pectin that feeds the bacteria of the gut, and carrying magnesium, potassium, calcium, and B vitamins together. Dried, the fig concentrates all of it, which is why the pressed fig cakes of the old world travelled so well and fed so many through the barren months. In a world with no bottled multivitamin, a handful of figs came remarkably close to being one, and the fruit's gentle laxative action was itself counted a medicine by people who understood how much of health begins in the gut. Number 4. The onion, the prebiotic king that helped pay the builders of the pyramids. Onions appear right beside garlic in that same wilderness lament of Numbers 11, and I want you to notice that they were treated as a food group in their own right, not a mere seasoning tossed in for flavour. The labourers who raised the great pyramids of Egypt were partly paid in onions and garlic, a wage counted out in produce because that produce was understood to keep a working body strong. Onions are among the richest sources of quercetin there is, a polyphenol studied in hundreds of trials for its anti-inflammatory, antihistamine, and antioxidant effects. It lowers blood pressure, calms inflammatory signalling, and eases the allergic response by steadying the mast cells that would otherwise flood the body with histamine. Their less celebrated power lies in a prebiotic fibre, the inulin-type fructans, which pass through undigested until they reach the colon and there feed the bifidobacteria and the lactobacillus, the very bacteria on which so much of our health rests. Garlic, onions, and leeks were daily fare in that world, and all three belong to the allium family, all of them generous with these same fibres. The sulfur compounds that make you weep when you cut an onion are the very ones that support the liver in its work of clearing the body, so even the sting of it is a kind of gift. Cooked long and slow, the onion turns sweet and gentle, but eaten raw or barely cooked, it keeps more of that quercetin and more of its prebiotic fibre, and a little raw onion in the day's food is an old and honest habit worth keeping, a humble bulb and a true powerhouse hidden in plain sight. Number 3. Raw honey, which I am tempted to call heaven's own antimicrobial. Honey runs all through Scripture as a food that gives strength and healing, and the reason is not sentiment, it is biochemistry. Raw honey is one of the most thoroughly studied natural antimicrobials we possess, and it can kill even antibiotic-resistant bacteria, MRSA among them, and it does so by 3 means at once. It generates hydrogen peroxide slowly as it meets the wound. Its low water content and its acidic pH together make a place that pathogens simply cannot survive, and it holds a protein called defensin-1, which pulls apart the cell structures of bacteria directly. This is not folklore dressed up. Manuka honey is used today in certified medical dressings laid on wounds in real hospitals, chosen precisely because bacteria struggle to raise any defense against so many weapons working together. A thin film of honey draws fluid out of a wound, keeps it moist enough to heal cleanly, and holds infection at bay all at once. And the old physicians who spread it on burns and ulcers were doing sound medicine without the words to name why. But the word that governs all of it is raw. Heating honey above roughly 40 degrees Celsius degrades the very enzymes that do the work, and most of the honey on the grocery shelf has been heated and filtered until it is little more than an expensive golden syrup. Seek out the raw. And if you doubt how well honey keeps, remember that archaeologists opened Egyptian tombs and found honey 3,000 years old that was still perfectly good to eat. Number 2. The almond, the nut around which sacred architecture was actually built. When God gave Moses the pattern for the menorah, the lampstand of the tabernacle, its cups were to be shaped like almond blossoms. And when Aaron's rod budded overnight, as told in the 17th chapter of Numbers, the buds it put forth were almonds. The almond was chosen as a symbol of watchfulness because it is the first tree to flower each spring, awake while the others still sleep. Almonds are among the most nutrient-dense foods we have. A single ounce gives you about 37% of the day's vitamin E in the form of alpha-tocosferol, the fat-soluble antioxidant that guards the membranes of every cell. They are high in magnesium too, a mineral that takes part in more than 300 reactions in the body and one that a great share of people simply do not get enough of. A shortage of it is tied to anxiety, poor sleep, muscle cramping, raised blood pressure, and unsteady blood sugar. Trials show that almonds lower LDL cholesterol, blunt the rise in blood sugar after a meal, improve the diversity of the gut, and help with keeping a healthy weight, because here again some of their fat goes to feed the gut bacteria rather than to be stored on the body. They carry good protein and fiber besides, along with the plant sterols that help hold cholesterol in check, so that the fullness they bring is honest and lasting rather than fleeting. In the old kitchens, the almond was ground into meal for bread, pressed for a fine oil, and soaked and pounded into a milk for those too weak or too ill to take heavier food, and a small handful eaten each day was thought to steady both the body and the mind. Number 1. Olive oil, which I hold to be the most complete single medicine the ancient world ever knew. Olive oil is referenced more than 140 times across Scripture. Kings were anointed with it, wounds were dressed with it, lamps were fed by it, and in the 10th chapter of Luke the Good Samaritan pours oil and wine into the wounds of a stranger left half dead by the road. Extra virgin olive oil is one of the most studied foods in all of nutrition, and the Mediterranean way of eating that is built around it is tied, across hundreds of trials, to less heart disease, less cancer, less inflammation, slower decline of the mind, less type 2 diabetes, and a lower risk of death from all causes together. Its chief compound is called oleocanthal, and this is the wonder of it. Oleocanthal acts on the very same pathway in the body as ibuprofen, the pain and inflammation reliever so many reach for. Since chronic low-grade inflammation is the quiet engine under most modern disease, a food eaten daily that lowers it is no small thing. The oil also carries vitamin E and vitamin K and a wealth of antioxidant polyphenols, along with a monounsaturated fat that the body handles with ease. But be warned, for most of the olive oil in the shops is pressed from late-harvested fruit, blended with cheaper refined oils, and treated with heat. What you want is cold-pressed, early harvest, extra virgin oil from a source you can actually trust, for that is the medicinal grade, and you can often know it by a faint peppery catch at the back of the throat, which is the oleocanthal itself announcing its presence. A tablespoon a day, used in cooking at gentle temperatures, poured raw over bread and greens, and rubbed into dry and weary skin as well, for the oil heals from without as surely as from within. So there they are, 10 foods and one conclusion that meets you from every direction. Not a single one of them required a laboratory to be discovered. Every one was found through generations of plain human experience, through people eating, watching, remembering, and passing the knowing down. Modern science has done nothing here but confirm, with its instruments and its trials, what the old world already held to be true in its bones. I find great comfort in that, for it means the path back to health is not hidden behind some new invention or some costly jar. It runs through the garden, the orchard, and the honest food our forebears knew by name. And so I will leave you with a challenge, the same one I would set before any brother in my care. Choose 2 foods from this list, only 2, and source them at the highest quality you can find. Then eat them faithfully every single day for 30 days. And as you do, pay attention to your body the way the ancients paid attention to theirs, patiently and honestly, and let it tell you what it feels. If this walk through the old healing foods fed you today, I would be glad of your company again. Leave a word below and tell me which 2 foods you mean to choose. Come back and let me know what the 30 days taught you. And stay near if you would like to keep learning the ways our ancestors kept themselves well. Until then, tend your garden, mind your table, and be at peace.